little bit more on Syria here. The Kurds say the United States agreed to stay in Syria. This is from Reuters, and they have a quote here from a Kurdish politician who said that they promised to do whatever it takes to destroy the Islamic State and work to build infrastructure in northeastern Syria. They said they are going to stay in Syria and will not withdraw. They will keep fighting the Islamic State. Before they were unclear under Trump and during the Afghan withdrawal, but this time they made everything clear. And so this is a statement from a Kurdish politician. So I'm skeptical because in the past I feel like the Kurds and their politicians have often oversold, at least from like what a high level US commitment to that region would be. See, like when Trump was trying to withdraw from Syria. Now maybe they're getting commitments from lower level US officials, but definitely from what Trump was willing to promise, I feel like the Kurds were overstating it. Nonetheless, this is important that the Kurds at least feel that they got a very strong guarantee from the US that we will be continuing our occupation of eastern Syria for a long time to come. Now this has a lot of important consequences, which is one, eventually at some point Assad is going to get to the point where the most lucrative areas of Syria left not under his control are the areas that are occupied by the United States, and just not letting a third of Syria be lopped off by and occupied by the United States and our Kurdish allies, which, look, Assad could also see it as if he doesn't take it from us, eventually we'll leave and he'll have to like take it from Turkey or something like that. As this is kind of what happened in the past, where when the U.S. withdrew a little bit off of the Syrian border, Turkey moved in and took that territory, not the Syrian government, or at least not entirety the Syrian government. And so this creates other problems and tensions. Looking forward, just as far as what's going to happen. My guess is that Assad is going to try to find a way to counter and challenge this, probably not at least at first through direct military action, but eventually that may be what Assad tries to resort to push the United States and reclaim this territory, which again is some of the most lucrative as far as oil production and food production in Syria, two things that the Syrian people are in desperate need of. And so this is really important, that at least again we're getting reports from the Kurds that the U.S. is planning on staying in Syria for some time to come. Also in Syria, we had a car bomb go off in the Afrin region. This is like north central Syria, and it's a little space in like an enclave inside of Syria that's controlled by Turkey, and Turkey shares a border with northern Syria. That was once a Kurdish stronghold, but the Kurds were kicked out, and then it was controlled by Turkey. So ever since in this region, there have been some car bombs going off, and every time Turkey blames the Syrian Kurds, the YPG. Now it's entirely possible to me that the YPG is carrying out these attacks. However, in this region, Turkey is allied with Al Qaeda, Al Nusra, and a bunch of jihadist nutjobs who would blow themselves up to kill some Kurds. And so it seems possible to me that maybe this is Turkey essentially using its allies who are, just doing things maybe outside Turkey's control, but then using it to spin propaganda against the Syrian Kurds. So I wouldn't take Turkey's word on that was the Syrian Kurds. However, if the Syrian Kurds are blowing themselves up with car bombs, it seems a real issue that the U.S. has allied itself with the Syrian Kurds in Syria. Just different things to think about on that issue. Another major Syria story. This one is Jordan's King Abdullah receives first call from Syria's Assad since the start of the conflict. So this was over 10 years ago. Two countries that share a very long border and a long relationship, and strong, economic, ties, are maybe looking at starting to normalize tensions after the war. Of course, I don't know if I guess Jordan did definitely carry out airstrikes in Syria although I believe those are mostly targeting the Islamic State. I don't know if they ever carried out any direct military action against Assad, but certainly Jordan has and did facilitate a lot of the U.S. support for the Syrian opposition, and continues to this day to allow the U.S. to control a small portion of Syria. It's like a 55-kilometer radius zone inside of Syria along the Jordanian border, where they back some militants, maybe 100 U.S. soldiers or so there. So, while maybe not in a overt sense, certainly in a covert sense, the Jordanians have been at odds and at war with Syria for the past 10 years, which has had real consequences for Jordan and Lebanon economically, as, the it is kind of hard to trade between the two states when Israel and Syria are exist in between. And of course, I'm sure for a lot of reasons, the trade going through Israel is kind of difficult. And so this could just be a one-off that Jordan is now looking to realizes that Assad will be keeping power in Syria, and it's just so important economically to have a relationship with Syria that Jordan is going to go ahead and start to ease its hostilities towards Syria. But it also could be the start of a trend where other Arab Gulf states start to warm relations and kind of realize the same thing, that Assad isn't going anywhere in Syria, and it's better to have a relationship with the power in control of Syria rather than playing up this fantasy that one day he's going to be overthrown by who knows what Syrian Kurd or something like that. So if that's the case, it could be something that really does help to bring an end to the Syrian war. Any diplomacy between Syria and Jordan, though, is not shared with its other neighbor. Israel fired a couple missiles at Syria. This is part of the hundreds of airstrikes that Israel has carried out in Syria over the course of this civil war. This time they killed 2 soldiers at the T4 air base. But, even if you're like, oh, well, it was soldiers that died or something like that, remember, this is open warfare that Israel is carrying out against Syria, and for all the condemnation of Assad and Iran for continuing the destabilizing the Middle East, creating instability, is Israel that's conducting open warfare against its neighbors when it doesn't need to, especially when we've seen in the past that weakening Assad only strengthens the al-Qaeda faction and forces that the U.S. and its allies have propped up in Syria.